Strangers Chapter 2 is a sequel to last year's train wreck of a remake, Strangers Chapter 1. Guys, no one asked for this or the previous one, and definitely nobody's gonna be asking for the next one. To have the gall and display this much hubris to watch that original film and think, yeah, I can make 3 movies out of this simple concept, is insane. What we're witnessing here is the Hobbit films all over again, where it's 90% filler and 10% story. There's just not enough meat in this story to expand on, and if there was, this ain't it. I'm not saying you can't try, but you should try way harder than this. There's stories that simply don't need expansion because there's beauty in the simplicity of it, and they're designed to stay within the bones of a smaller world. Hell, as it is, the original Strangers films have enough vitriol since a story like that can really work for some and not so much for others. Me personally, I really love that original film. Home invasion horror movies are easily among the most unsettling films because of how realistic they are, since they do happen. It's a little too real, you know? And the element of anonymity to see that it's just random people doing it with no personal vendetta against you or fault of your own. You were just the shot in the dark and it was bad luck that it happened to you makes it that much more frightening. It's a real fear, and I like to think that if movies like that didn't come out, we wouldn't have huge franchises like The Purge, where even though the later installments do away with that, the first film is a home invasion, and a good one at that. But they are dragging the Strangers title in the mud the more and more entries we get in this series, to the point that it'll obliterate the little respect that's left for this franchise. It's just gonna leave a stench and a bad taste for anything Strangers related. That being said, with the expectations for the remaining entries being rock bottom after the remake, certainly it wasn't gonna be any worse than that. I mean, it's literally as low as it can go. Because if nothing else, everything from this point onward would be fresh and new, so naturally it would have to be better just by default. We can't go lower than rock bottom.
Got him! Got him!
I'm just at a loss of words. Part of me feels ironically impressed by how they were able to contest that argument in the manner they did. This movie is 90 minutes of nothing, and yet it's constantly trying to intrigue you and make you think, yes, you are curious about these people and their motives. No, it's like you watched those first 2 movies and you didn't get what made them good. It's so frustrating. Part of me really thinks that Lionsgate is just gonna pull the plug and not let that 3rd movie release, even though honestly with these movies being so low budget that they probably will make enough of a profit to continue on to the next entry, regardless of the bad reception. So is there anything really noteworthy about this movie? Anything of value that merits the existence of this movie?
Oh, no.
In various interviews, the director has talked about how he has a vision for this now franchise and where he wants to go with it, what he wants to explore, and the more these movies keep coming out, the more sauce and likability is siphoned out of this title.
These are not really sequels. This is like one long 4.5-hour movie, just split into 3 chapters. And we learn ourselves when we see the movie put together. And to be able to go back and say like, okay, let's emphasize this a little bit. Let's explore this a little bit. It's like the greatest gift, greatest joy to be able to do it.
And to paraphrase, he basically says how the first movie was necessary to lay the groundwork so he can get to the real meat and potatoes of this trilogy. It's trying to do that familiar long chase where we follow our lead as they're constantly running away from the killer. We've all seen that horror movie play out. You're trying to emulate that Halloween 2 plot, but it's done in such a clumsy way. I'm not even much of a Halloween 2 fan in general. I hate seeing Laurie, whichever iteration you want to pick, in a hospital setting because she's always unable to do anything every time because of her injuries. You ever think about how each Halloween 2 or sequel, since Resurrection is considered a sequel, is set in a hospital, and it's just not as entertaining as the first of its respective timeline? Anyway, even based off of that, Strangers Chapter 2 ripped a page out of the wrong playbook. And on top of that, there was no personality in this film. It felt so disingenuous and derivative.
Bullshit. Derivative.
Yes, movies derive elements from other movies all the time, but at the bare minimum, there's always an earnest attempt at adding their own flavor to it. You can't just coast on copying pasting stuff that's been done before in far superior ways. I say, as we're 2 movies in and headed towards the 3rd movie, this movie is one big chase sequence, but because that's all it is, you quickly realize that there's no plot to this. It's just survive. Which in another circumstance, it's not a bad thing, but because of how plain and how much it lacks creativity, you find yourself bored pretty quickly. Also, these 2 movies do the feeling like an outsider thing that plenty of other movies have done before, where it feels like the whole town is in on it except you, but it doesn't work in this series at all. On top of the fact that, believe it or not, this is an R-rated movie. Like, How? There is no need for an R rating in this movie. There is no gore. There's like one scene that could have led to a need for practical effects where a guy is gonna get axed, but it's a cutaway. So you don't see anything in this movie. And allegedly, after the poor reception from the remake, they went back and reshot some of this movie. So this is the edited version. The fact that this is the better version makes me really curious to what that original movie looked like, even though all they did was probably just add more blood to justify the R rating. There's parts in this thing that you could just tell there's random CG blood on clothes and stuff, where I feel like it would have been cheaper and easier if you would have just added blood originally instead of having this obvious CG blood. Can't believe director Renny Harlin basically says he has something to say with these movies and that he's gonna expand the world of the strangers, where really this could be chopped up to just a dream sequence. That's the big purpose you had? Nobody cares about the origin of Tamara. Nobody cares about who or what or why is Tamara. Exploring these random notes of a story isn't always necessary. The obscurity of it is the best part because often the explanation is lame and lackluster. This movie treats the exploration of who Tamara is as this pivotal moment in the series and the payoff that fans have been desperately asking for. But it's really not that serious. But even trying to give the benefit of the doubt to the movie and play along with the intrigue of who Tamara is, the explanation they gave is so lame and severely lacking creativity. You had a clean sheet of making that origin as fascinating as possible, but instead it felt so dull and anticlimactic that it just proved that over-explaining certain things isn't worth the effort, if you can even call that an effort. I think what triggers me about this new run of films is its lack of identity. For example, Strangers Prey at Night is an entirely different movie than the original, and I remember liking it and giving it credit because even though it deviates from the atmosphere of the original completely, there was a confidence in the movie making where the movie unapologetically says, yes, I know this is different because I don't want to repeat the first movie. I want something entirely different. It's more campy, it's more fun than the original, that's for sure, just because of the change in tone, the colors, the 80s aesthetic. I mean, that pool scene is iconic. I respected the hell out of that movie, but the more entries for this series come out, the more I respect Strangers Prey at Night. The chapter series is so timid and shaky about what it's trying to be, and it's so lost in its identity crisis that you can't help but think how pointless these movies feel outside of being a cash grab at best. There's a sequence in this movie that literally gave me whiplash because I honestly thought I walked into the wrong movie. Kinda like when Thunderbolts was actually titled New Avengers. Madeline Pesh gets attacked and oh my god, everything about that sequence was just wrong. What was the logic behind that scene? I would really love to be able to ask the creative team what was the idea behind having that whole sequence occur when it literally has zero connection to the story. And then the following scene is just a flashback to try and make me sympathize with it, where I'm just like, this isn't a real character in this story. There's a catalog of comfort movies for everyone, myself included, that it's a certain amount of movies that you know are trashy, but you just love to rewatch, whether it's because they're cozy, they're silly, there's something of entertainment value that you can come back and rewatch it another time. I can understand people defending last year's Death of a Unicorn, Tarot, I can even understand Until Dawn. But nothing about these movies are entertaining. These are not comfort movies, because there's always a gimmick, a charm, creative and fun sequences that make comfort movies worth rewatching despite their flaws. There's no redeeming qualities about these two movies, and the more I think about it, the more confident I am that Chapter 2 is worse than Chapter 1. At least Strangers Chapter 1 has the whole psycho thing where it's bad because it doesn't bring anything new to the table, but technically it's good because it's basically a beat for beat copy of the original. Strangers Chapter 2 somehow obliterates the nuance and mystique of all these characters and makes them pathetic. There's literally no threat level in this movie because it's the second movie out of a trilogy, so you know Madeline Pesh is not gonna die by the end. Although to be honest, if that had happened, maybe it would have jolted me back to life by the end. The to be continued at the end truly felt like a punchline to a joke. I almost wanted the director to come out and say, that was all a prank and now the real movie's about to start, because this movie, just no. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.